But we're so glad that you are here. We'll have hopefully a real nice conversation tonight about finishing up Daniel chapter 2. If you did not get the one call announcement that went out, make sure that you get with the office to make sure you're on that list. But there's a lot of stuff going on, so there's some things that are being moved around that we need to let you know about. And let you know about those before we do our prayer requests. The biblical citizenship class that is usually here on Thursdays by Tony, that is being moved to Friday. All right, I don't know. Tony, is that the same time on Friday that it would be? All right, so there'll be an announcement coming out about that. So it will be Friday. Some of you are planning to be here on Friday to help with the Ukraine, packing up the winter clothing for Ukraine. That is being postponed as well. And we don't know the date of that yet, but Chuck Shepard will get that to us soon. So don't show up Friday looking to pack up clothing. Bread of Life is still this Saturday, so make sure that you come and volunteer for Bread of Life. And then also Sunday is the Orange Avenue Chili Cook-Off. So be ready for that. All right, so it's with Thomas Smith is leading our small group ministry, and this is is this fourth Sunday? Fifth Sunday. Is this the fifth Sunday this Sunday? Fifth Sunday. But the rhythm that we're going to have in our small groups is that last Sunday, or is it going to be fourth Sunday? You let me know. I'm just going to say last Sunday of the month, but Thomas will get you going with that. Is going to be not a small group Sunday, but a full church get-together Sunday. And so this coming one is going to be a chili cook-off. So we need you to do a few things. First of all, well, maybe not a few things. If you are going to compete in the chili cook-off, you just need to bring your best chili to share. Don't bring your subpar chili, and we don't want your bad chili. We want your good chili, all right, the best that you've got. And I want you to know that I'm an expert at all the local chilies, so I know if you're bringing Wendy's chili, and I know if you're bringing Culver's chili, and I know if you're going to have Chili's chili. All right, so don't be bringing any of that store-bought stuff. Make sure you have your best recipe that you're bringing. Maybe, just maybe, I don't know what this all means, you'll be the one to win the highly sought-after golden ladle. It's not an idol, it's just a ladle. All right, we're not bowing down to it or anything like that. It's just a golden ladle you can keep in your own home that you could win. Kevin, I know you're pretty pumped up about that. So bring your chili. If you're not going to bring chili, bring a side, bring some desserts, some cornbread or something like that to go with chili. But plan is to be together, have a great time, and then after the chili cook-off and fellowship, we're going to come back in here for a time of singing together. And then after that singing time, we'll be dismissed for the night. So I don't know about you. I love being together with my church family. And so it'll be an awesome Sunday to get to come in here, worship together, go in there, fellowship together, come back in and worship together. And it's going to be an awesome Sunday. Prayer requests. Oh, sorry. I got one more thing to announce. The football game on Friday and the chicken supper on Friday have been canceled. So if you are a normal chicken supper goer, don't show up for chicken supper on Friday, or you're not going to have chicken to eat. So just want to make you aware of that. All right. A lot of prayer requests. Vicki Jones called in today, and she had her doctor's appointment to deal with, it actually is her sciatic nerve is being incredibly compressed and pinched, and that's causing her a lot of pain. She says, thank God we are finally getting the help we need. Got a lot of necessary referrals from her doctor, and she feels like she's making some progress into getting some good answers there. I don't know if you saw this, but one of the young men, actually it's two of the young men, one of the young men's been coming to church with Colby Tackett. Mikey has been, and his brother Joey. They lost their mom this past Saturday. And they had already previously lost their dad. And so they have an uncle that they're really close with. But in the one call now, their address is there if you want to send any cards, just thinking about you, praying for you. And then also the MDCA staff is putting together a gift card basket for the boys. And if you'd like to donate a gift card or anything towards that, you can see Charlie Markison. So just a terrible loss there, for sure. Ken Snyder is at home recovering from his knee replacement, and he had a little rough go after that replacement, but I believe he is doing much better at home right now. Teresa Sullivan is going to have a cancer check-in appointment on the 10th of October. They're hoping that that cancer is still in the smoldering stage and so that she won't need chemo at this time. Tim's sister, Margaret, has ovarian cancer, and that's the same cancer that his sister passed away with. And so we're going to be in prayer for Margaret. Elizabeth Brackett, many of you heard on Sunday, she took a fall, had to go to the ER. She is at home recovering, and Ron said she's doing well. I will say this because it's Ron. He did tell me the only thing that's sad is that she did not have any sense knocked into her. Like, Ron, you can't say that stuff because you know I'm going to repeat it on live stream. But no, hopefully Ron gets in trouble for that. And we're going to be praying for Ron Brackett as well.
For his fall?
Yeah, for his mysterious fall that's about to happen. Okay. And then last on my list that I've got here, Karen Stutzman called in this afternoon. She went to the doctor. She was thinking she was going to need a hip replacement, which would have been like replacement number bazillion for her on different joints and stuff like that. It turns out she doesn't need a hip replacement, but I don't know if this is good news or not. Almost every vertebrae is bulging. And so she is being referred to a spinal specialist, and apparently you can't do a spinal replacement. They have to figure out some kind of way to help her out there, but she is in great spirits, and actually she is saying, this is great, we can find out the source. You may not know, but she, every now and then, if she is getting up or going down, just blacks out and falls, and it injures her pretty bad, and they think they found the reason why is all those bulging discs and things pressing on different things. So hopefully answers can be found and healing can happen, and that's what we're going to be praying for. All right. Anything that we need to be praying about tonight? No? All right. Oh. Okay. What? I didn't hear the first. Esther. Okay. And she's had some tests done? Okay. All right. All right. Well, let's do some praying, and then we're going to hop into our lesson tonight. Our Father in heaven, we come to you, and honestly, we just want to be incredibly grateful for everything you've blessed us with. And we want to pause right now and marvel at the power of the creation that you have created. But God, at the same time as we marvel, we ask that you keep those who are in harm's way just in your hand of protection. And God, I pray that with anything, with good, bad, and things that are neutral, that all things in some way can draw people towards a realization of you as our Creator. But God, we have so many that we're praying for, that we're mourning with those who mourn, we're celebrating with those who are celebrating. And God, we have so many who are sick and facing issues right now. And I want to lift up to you a few of those tonight with Esther, who's awaiting these results. And I pray, God, that what comes back is something that can be treatable, or even what comes back is something that is nothing to worry about. But God, I just pray that you hold her in your arms. God, be with Vicki Jones and Karen Stutzman as they're both in pain and trying to figure out issues with how to fix things. And I pray, God, that healing can occur for both of them. God, be with Ken as he recovers. Be with the whole Sullivan family as they've got family who are facing cancer, and Teresa is having a checkup coming in. And I pray, God, that good news is what they get. And be with Elizabeth as she's at home and recovering. And I pray, God, that her recovery can be full and well. And God, I also want to lift up to you Mikey and Joey. And I know these young men have faced a lot of loss already in their young lives. I know that Mikey, at least, is one who's searching for you. And I want to pray, God, that you be with all those who get to be in touch with him and contact with him that are... I just pray, God, that you give Colby and the whole staff over there the gift to be able to minister to him, to be present, to listen, and whatever it is that they need. I just pray, God, that you be with their hearts and give their family a comfort and a peace that only can come from you. And God, with all the stuff going on here at Orange Avenue, I'm just thankful for a church family who's together. I'm thankful, God, that you've blessed us with workers, that even as we sit in this room, we're going to open up the Word, and we know in other rooms the Word is being opened up, and we can hear the voices of those who are praising you. Our children are learning about you. Our teenagers are in the Word, just trying to know more and more about who you are. I'm thankful, God, to be a place who loves you. I'm thankful to be a place who wants to be transformed by you. I'm thankful to be at a place who ultimately just wants to make disciples for you. So God, may we do that better in our own homes. May we do that better here at this congregation. And may we do that better in our communities. God, as we open up your word tonight, I pray that by your Spirit, you give us the ability to understand and comprehend, the ability to take the things that we're learning and put them into practice. And God, may we walk away with a better knowledge because of what we see in Scripture of how we interact in a world that is constantly walking away from you. So God, guide us tonight. Be with our conversation. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Hey, good news this week. I brought my notes. All right. Bad news is now I'm going to go back and do the whole lesson again because I've got my notes. No, we're not going to do that. If you remember, we did not finish up Daniel chapter 2 last week. We ended up taking it a little bit slower, and so we're going to be in Daniel chapter 2 again. You're going to see some similar slides. I'm going to zoom through these first ones because we've already talked about them. We started off with those two questions that we ended with last week, and those questions were, we all have our own feelings about these things, and I just want us to get thinking about them. The first question was, what areas do Christians really need to be concerned about in our culture? And I've got my own thoughts about that. I've got my own opinions about that. And there's some big things that our culture is attacking where God is the originator of these things, and our culture likes to change these things. Right? When I think about these questions, and the second one is this, what areas do Christians need to settle down a little bit on because they aren't necessarily violations of God's law? And, I'm not saying they're not things that we don't need to be upset about, we don't need to be thinking about and conversing about, but let me just make a contrast here that may or may not be fair. My own personal opinion is that Christians need to be more worried about the state of the family in our country than the state of our bank accounts in our country. And the reason I say that, and you might disagree with me, that's okay to disagree with me, is that I know that the family is within God's will, and He is the one who created that. I also know that when it comes to money, Jesus Himself said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Those are one of those things that at the end of all of this, you're not going to have, your bank account doesn't matter. Right? You may pass it on to your kids and that kind of stuff, but it's not something that is eternal. But our families, our children, our relationships, all those things, what has to come with people, and especially our own families that we've been blessed with, they all have souls, and those souls are eternal. And so when it comes to the family, we need to be, I don't want to say up in arms, but we need to be more concerned about the way that our society is attacking the family, and less worried about, not worried about, but less worried about what our retirement accounts look like and what our property taxes are doing. Like, I don't like those things to go up and go down. Like, that's not a great thing.
Go down, yes.
Go down. Well, it depends on which one. Your bank account or the property taxes?
Yes.
Both. And those things, obviously, you work at those things, you want those things to go well. But man, I want to preserve what God has created in my own children, to be able to answer the right questions and pick up the right banners that we're going to be working on and fighting for. And that's the only reason we talk about those things. So in Daniel chapter 2, I know you're not going to like this, but I do want to read this first part of Daniel chapter 2 again. And we're going to get into the second half of the chapter tonight. That's not fair. We're not going to get into the second half of the chapter. The second half of the first half. What's that mean?
Second quarter.
Second quarter of the chapter tonight. Just preach. I was just reading. We're going to read. All right? In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dream. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. Nice, benevolent king, right? Right? These are his people, his wise men. And what's going to happen if they can't not only interpret the dream that he had, but tell him the dream that he had? What is going to happen to them?
Rip them apart.
He's going to rip them apart, right? Not just kill them, but he's going to torture them. He's going to rip them apart. And as you get down, verse 6 says, but if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. And they answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. So what they're asking, is it the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar has said he wants? No, he wants them to tell the dream and the interpretation, and they come back and say what? Well, tell us the dream, and then we'll tell you the interpretation. Now, obviously, let's just say, I don't want to pick on you tonight. If Joseph came in tonight and he said, guys, I had a dream last night, and I want you to interpret this dream for me. If he had some kind of crazy dream and he told it to you out loud, you could interpret the dream, right? Like you could say, I think that means. And if you do the right thing and you say things the right way, you don't even have to say, I think that dream. You can say, oh, that's easy. That dream meant this. And this is what these guys do, right? This is what they've normally done. If there's an issue going on, they can make themselves look like they're doing something right. And this is what they're trying to set Nebuchadnezzar up to. They have no power. They can't tell him that dream. And so they're wanting the information so that they can just say whatever they want to interpret that dream. And Nebuchadnezzar kind of catches on here. The king says in verse 8, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. And the Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked for such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. And the thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with the flesh." And so, because of this, the king was very angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. And that's kind of where we stopped last week, and we're going to finish up this account this week. But what we began with last week is a question. Why are we surprised by the way the world thinks and behaves? You know, I mean, it's almost like we should expect this by now, right? It's so funny how this works out. We're getting ready to be at a place in 1 Corinthians as we get into chapter 5. So when I say get ready, I mean at some point. We're getting ready to be in chapter 5 that talks about this very thing, right? That talks about the difference of the world and how they act, and the church and how they act. And Paul's even going to get to the point where he says, should you sit around judging the people who don't know who God is? He says, no, they're not the ones who need the judgment. It's the ones who are in the church that need the judgment. Now, what is that all about?
Know better.
Yeah, for those who know to do what is right, it is right for us to, when they don't do what's right, to show them the right way, right? Because, and we say this with our kids, right? We don't really use this terminology in the church too much, you should have known better, right? And that's why Paul is writing the letter to Corinth, right? Is that this is a church that had been established, and this is the church that has been going for a little while. He spent 18 months with them and taught them certain things and showed them certain ways, and they get all messed up in being pretty much polluted by the culture that's around them. Namely, one of the big things is one of the things that we see in our culture a whole lot, sexual immorality. Like in Corinthians, he even had to call out a man who was with his father's wife. Like, what? And not only was that the case, but he said, you are arrogant about your sin as well. Now, should that man who is a part of that church known better? Oh, 100%. So Paul could walk in and say, well, this is a spoiler alert, but the stuff that we probably need to do more often and we don't do enough, and it sounds a little bit like old and cranky, but he said, do not associate with the one in the body who is practicing sexual immorality. Like, that's how serious it is for those who are in the church, who know what is right to do. That when there is someone who is unrepentantly dealing with sexual immorality and just stuck in it, and now this person's arrogant about it. Oh, what's another word what comes from arrogance? Pride, right? Our culture doesn't deal with that at all, right? With sexual immorality and pride is just, it's not a cultural thing, right? But when it happens in the church, there needs to be a way that we go about that. But when it comes to the world, why do we get so up in arms about what the world is doing when they don't yet know what the right way to do things is? I mean, it's like we turn on the TV sometimes or social media sometimes, and we can get so frustrated by the things that are going on in our government, by the things that are going on in society. But why should we be surprised? Like, I don't know every person that is there, but I'll make a governmental statement here. I haven't seen either of our candidates profess a faith in Jesus Christ and following Jesus. right? So why would I be surprised with the things that they say and the things that they do? Why would I be surprised that I don't agree with what this one says and this one says? I'm just saying, why would I be surprised? Because they are not at the standard, they don't have the same standards that you and I should have. And so I just want to be you look at Nebuchadnezzar, and it's easy for us to say, what a harsh person, right? What a harsh person. This guy gave an impossible task. And if you could not complete the impossible task, you are ripped limb from limb. And man, that's surprising to me, but that's probably normal.
Property taxes don't sound so bad now.
Right? If you didn't hear Chris, property taxes don't sound too bad now. Sorry, Thomas. Tony, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it just seems to be degenerating, and that's the thing that's disturbing. It seems to be getting worse and worse.
But why would it not? What would be the reason for the world to get better?
Christians.
It should be, right? Perhaps the way that we act in a secular world could, at some point, end up making a difference within the secular world. That might be one way to go about things. Maybe Daniel will do something, similar. I just want to make sure that we have a baseline here, or at least an understanding. I don't want to condone the things the world is doing, but I've got to stop being surprised by them. And I've got to stop pointing fingers all the time in judgment of everything the world is doing, and and being, how do I say this the best way? And being easier on sin within the church than I would be with sin that is in the world. Do you know what I mean? Maybe not. Tony, I saw your hand do that real quick.
If the church was growing the way it ought to, then the sin of the world would be called sin and exposed for that. But because we have secular people running the show
At church?
in the world,
Oh, okay.
right? And government's the easy thing. As you put secular people into government, then the decisions that the government makes, the laws that the government makes, become more and more corrupt.
Sure.
Because it reflects the world.
Yeah. In an unfortunate, seeming to be biblical trend, it is not until the laws and the culture gets really, really bad before the people who are really, truly following Jesus start to shine the brightest. You see places even now, the higher the persecution, the greater the faith. So I'm not really, there's no fear in what's to come. Bring it on. You made a statement at the beginning of your statement, if the church was growing the way it should. All right. Why is it not? Bad preaching. That's what it is. Ms. D? Go ahead. Okay. Yeah. So if Ms. Walters said she doesn't think Christians speak up the way that they should. And when things happen that shouldn't happen, we're silent sometimes. And I agree with you. We do speak up a lot, but just not on the right things, I think. I mean, not all of us, not everybody.
Well, sit back and let the Bibles be taken out of school, and that's where a lot of the children growing up, that's the only place they got knowledge of God.
Yeah. And it's not in many homes anymore either. Yep. Seth, I know you don't need a microphone, big dog, but it's for the live stream.
I feel special now. I think that when you look at Christians and why the church is not growing the way it should be, I think sometimes we're scared as Christians to be wrong in the world, because then there's a chance of us becoming a hypocrite because, hey, you're, the log and the speck, right? But sometimes we don't own our sin like we should, so that we can't repent like we should.
Yeah. All right. All good stuff. And I guess the question that we are ultimately getting to is if we are in a failing culture, an increasingly secular culture, and we are going to proclaim faith in Jesus Christ, what does that actually look like? Right? Now, I know I'm in a different situation. I go to work with people who follow Jesus. Right? So I know I am benefited in that way. But one of the things we try to do is not only spend time with people who believe in Jesus, right? And so when I'm going to go in different places, I'm going to encounter different people all the time that do not follow Jesus. In fact, oftentimes, like if I walk into Sunday Cool, which I'll do usually about once a week for about an hour, I'm going to have people there that do believe in Jesus. I'm going to have people there who adamantly have conflict with God, who openly want nothing to do with me in conversation because they've already made their mind up that God is not who he says he is, or he does not exist. So, we're all going to encounter this as we got into culture. So the question is, what does it look like for a Christian now to walk into culture and to be present in our culture, not influenced by our culture or polluted by the world, as James puts it, but to be able to have an impact in our culture? It seems like Daniel was really good at that. Caitlin? Oh, coming over.
Well, I think it looks like just being a light, being a friend, being a neighbor, and it gets people's attention because it's so different. Mm-hmm. It's not that you're out there saying, well, this is what I do, and look, this is how you should be acting. I think it naturally, it gets people's attention if you're different, the way that we're called to be different. And I think that, hopefully starts conversations in your life with other people. And that's not to excuse like you having conversations with people, you starting them intentionally. But I think a lot of times people are drawn to kind people because people aren't kind. And so I think that, if you're being a kind Christian person to the secular world, they kind of are taken aback, and sometimes they'll ask you about it, and that's an opening for having that conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As you say that, I think about some of the habits that I got into for a long time and have admittedly not done as good a job at those things anymore. I think it was a couple years ago, we kind of challenged the church to have spiritual conversations and non-spiritual places, and just see how that goes for a little while. And for a while, we were, no matter where we were, at a restaurant or something like that, we were going to invite the waiter and waitress to pray with us. We were going to see what's going on in their lives, to see if they wanted us to pray for them at all. And we haven't totally neglected that. But man, it is so easy to just walk in, order, eat, go, and at least we're always kind, and that makes a world of difference. But sometimes, in the right situations, our kindness can be very intentional as we are getting to know people, as we are getting to know our own neighbors. And I don't know what that looks like in your neighborhoods, but how many of us have good, firm relationships with the people that live closest to us? And they're not at this church. Busted back here. All right. It's a good question. Some of it, praise God if you do, right? There's every now and then you get that cranky neighbor, right? Or you might be that cranky neighbor. Just putting it out there. I don't know which one you are. I'm the neighbor who mows his yard at 8:30 in the morning. My bad. But I'll tell you what, you've got to start cultivating good relationships built on kindness with the people that you live the closest with. And man, we can get into all kinds of disagreements with our neighbors and with our, like I went home today and saw one of the things nobody wants to see. The cable company dug up my yard. I was like, man, I just had it looking not really great, but almost great. And all of a sudden, there's just chunks of my yard dug up. And I was like, oh, man. And by principle, I'm not going to quantum fiber now because that's who did it. But I had a choice. How am I going to respond? And I've seen other neighbors respond, like, get out of my yard kind of thing. That guy. But I just went, thank you for digging those holes. And maybe not like that, but you don't have to be rude about everything you don't like. And I think, Caitlin, what you're saying is 100% true. Start with kindness and how we interact. Does cultural combat always bring the best results? I mean, we love it though, right? We love it on at least social media. I always love what Mike Tyson said, where he says, social media is for wimps because you can say what you want and not get punched in the face. Like half the things that you say to somebody online, you would never say to somebody out in the open or face to face. But we do, and we argue and we fight, and sometimes we fight inwardly in those areas as well. What in the world is our culture going to think if that's what we put out for the world to see, rather than being who Jesus actually called us to be?
Kenny, one of the funny but profound things that I've thought about through the years, some in our class remember Paul Faulkner out of Abilene. And several years ago, Paul said he had just wanted a Suburban so bad, back when Suburbans were just coming online. And he had wanted one. He had thought about it. He had seen Suburbans. He had just gotten jealous and envious of those who had one. But finally, he bought a Suburban. And he said the first day he had it, a woman T-boned him and just tore it all to pieces. And he said, I was so mad, I was so angry, and I didn't know what to do, so I just stood over to the side of the road and I looked at that car, that Suburban, and I said, God, I'm glad that belongs to you, because if that was my vehicle, I'd tear that woman's head off.
However you've got to remind yourself to act the right way, I am glad he did the right thing in the moment. All right? So what we've been really asking is this: what's the recipe for dealing with culture? Like, how do we go about that? The first thing we saw Daniel do in that what we just read is he approached at least the king's guard, the king's captain, with two things: prudence and discretion. He didn't walk in blazing guns. He didn't walk in starting a fight, but he started with discretion and prudence. All right, so some things that are kind of built into that we talked about last week is this: he probably knew exactly what he wanted to do, but there was tact involved. That he had a mission in mind, but he was going to be very careful about how he approached this thing. He could have gone to the king's guard. I mean, to be able to just speak to the king's captain shows that he had some kind of relationship there already. And he could have been angry and he could have been upset, but instead he went about things tactfully. And what that does is at least shows us the ability that we have to think before we act or speak. Right? Is that not also a biblical principle? In your anger, do not sin, right? And be slow to speak and quick to listen, right? These are things that are very biblical principles, and they're really fun to work on these things in our own homes. But we have got to work on these things when we're interacting with culture as well. Daniel was really good at this. When he was interacting with his culture, or not his culture, this secular culture of Babylon, he used prudence and discretion. We talked about that last week a little bit, but let's continue on in the story in chapter 2, beginning in verse 17, and we'll get the rest of this recipe, just 3 more points with this recipe of dealing with culture. Verse 17 says, "Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon." All right? A really important point here that I want to, I'll just put on the screen and we'll talk about it. The second thing that I want to make sure that we know that Daniel does, he gathers, they gather to seek God's help. Right? This is like, there's 2 points here that are incredibly important that we need to understand as we're facing a culture that is secular. First is this: you don't do it alone. Like, there's no like lone warriors out here where like, I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to face this culture with you or without you kind of thing, right? It's not like you're the hero of this story. It's not like you're the only person who's equipped to go out into this place and to make a difference. Daniel, knowing that he had people around him that he could go to, and how do you know he could go to them? These are people that he was taken, Babylon took these men with him. They were chosen as some of these select men with Daniel. They were trained up the same way by Babylon that Daniel was, and he didn't know this yet, but we'll see they had the same conviction about following their God that Daniel did. So it's really important at this point to understand that as a follower of Jesus, if we're going to face a culture that is increasingly secular, our closest friends had better be people who are following Jesus as well. Right? I know that's like you might say that's a lesson that you might teach your teenagers, and goodness, I always did, but it is something that as adults we need to hear again. Because whether it come from work or from our kids' school or our kids' sports teams or something that you enjoy and go have fun with, it is easy to make friends based on similar life stages only, or kids have similar interests so we can get together. And sometimes if we do things that way, our best friends and our closest confidants and allies a different word there I should have used, our closest people that we're together with all the time end up being people who are not necessarily followers of Jesus like you are. And I'm not saying you should not relate to people who are not following Jesus, but if we are going to make a difference in a culture that is secular, then it is really good to have people around you that are not secular. Like, I think about it, and I won't obviously say any names, but our kids are in school, and our kids make friends, especially Lennon. She's a friendly kid, and so she likes to make friends. And in that, friends always, she'll come home often saying, "Can I go to this sleepover?" I'm like, "Well, who is it?" And if I don't know the name or the parent, and even if I do know the name and parent, there's almost 100% chance the answer is going to be absolutely not. Like, there's multiple reasons for that. To be fair, there's a good chance even if a lot of people from church will say, "Hey, come do this," we're just not into it all that much. All right? And the reason is, especially if I don't know a family and don't know a thing, and a lot of times it's, well, let's get together with those parents and we can get to know each other and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's one of the most awkward situations in the world. All right, not saying it's a bad situation, but it's awkward. Especially when, if you're sitting in a room with 4 or 5 families that don't know Jesus and you're the only one who does. I don't want to say even me. I'm not typically a timid person with speaking up and saying things, but in that situation, I even feel like drawing back. Like, I'll just kind of see what's going on here kind of thing. I'll hear what's going on. I'll make my judgments when I go home, and I'll think about things and that kind of stuff. But I don't like being in that situation. But you know what emboldens me a little bit more? If I've got another family right there next to me who is from church or who follows Jesus, and then we can start to, it emboldens me to be around other believers who are more likely to stand firm on faith in God when I'm around people who are not. Daniel could have gone to God in prayer on his own. We know he's a praying man. But what does he do? He finds his 3 closest friends who have the same conviction about following God. He gathers them together, and they together seek the help of God. Right? They go together to God in prayer. I would suggest that we as a church here at Orange Avenue need to pray more. Let me say that a little better. We need to pray more together. My suggestion, you may not like this, is that there need to be times where we come together and that's all we do is pray. And pray and pray and pray. And we need to understand the situations that each unique person is going through. And I'll just take Thomas Smith. I hope you don't mind if I pick on you. I don't know your friends. Am I a friend? Maybe. We're neighbors, kind of. But I know that he works in a job that is around secular people, right? And but I don't know the situations that are going on. He's told me a couple of things, but I don't know the situations. But man, I also know that Bill, he goes to work and he's around secular people. And I've heard the little things, but I don't know every little situation. But it would be so helpful if we came together and we shared those struggles that we're having and the things that we are praying for and say, hey, can we be praying for all those things together? So if Thomas could come and we had this setting where it's like, Thomas says, hey, so I'm having a hard time at work because I'm being asked to do this, but I really feel convicted to do this. Can we all get together and pray about that? That seemed to be a step that Daniel would have taken. Seemed to be a step that Daniel's taking. A little bit more severe in Daniel's case because they're trying to preserve their lives. So what does he say? Get together. Let's bring our friends together, our brothers in Christ in our context together, and seek the mercy from God in heaven concerning this mystery that's going on, so that Daniel and his companions may not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men in Babylon. We have got to gather together more often and not just pray for the sick and not just pray for the things that we need and all that kind of stuff. Not bad things to pray about, but we need to pray for the emboldenment of the believers so that when we go into this culture, we can be an actual influence in this culture. Did Daniel know the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had? He had no idea the dream. But what did it say a couple of verses before? And Daniel went in and requested, verse 16, the king to appoint him a time that he might show what? The interpretation to the king. That seems a little backwards, right? That seems backwards. Or Daniel was so confident in God that he made a proclamation to the king without knowing anything, but trusting that God was going to come through. Can you imagine that kind of confidence in God? Do you have that kind of confidence in God? You have to answer that out loud. But he said, I'm going to interpret your dream. And then he went back and said, hey guys, we need to get together and pray for wisdom because I got to interpret this dream. Because if I don't, we're going to die. That's kind of, he didn't say that, but that's kind of what's going to happen, right? So let's keep on reading here. Verse 19, it says, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. And then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. Oh, that's a good one to focus on, right? What did Daniel say there? Who's in charge of the governments? God. Yeah, God is. He puts kings in place, and he does what? He removes kings. And gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge and those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter. So what happened? Daniel and his friends sought wisdom from God, and what did God give them? Wisdom. Are you guaranteed God will give you wisdom if you ask him for it? Everybody should do this. James chapter 1, right? We know that's in God's will to give wisdom. So if you ask for wisdom, guess what he will give you? If you don't doubt. He'll give you wisdom. He shows it even right here with Daniel. Verse 24 says, Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and said thus to him, Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. One really cool side point to make here is this. When the man of God sought wisdom of God, and he was given to that by God, he went in and not only saved his own life, but he saved the lives of all the secular people that were there as well. That doesn't seem just, but sometimes that's just the byproduct of people of God standing up for the right thing. That other people get to feel the positive results of God working, not just the people who are godly. But what does that normally do?
Get their attention.
It gets their attention, right? Normally should get their attention. Verse 25 says, Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. And the king declared to Daniel, whose name to him was Belshazzar, Are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? And Daniel answered the king and said, I love what he says here, No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, the mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. Now, next week, I think it's fairly interesting. We're going to walk through the interpretation of that dream and what those things mean. It's pretty interesting to think about the different things that Nebuchadnezzar was dreaming about. But I do want to make two more quick points about this dealing with culture. One of the things that we got to be really comfortable with when it comes to dealing with a culture that is secular is letting God do what God does. Now, I know to some of us that can seem like it's too passive, right? Like we talk about prayer like this a lot. And there are times where this is absolutely true. A lot of times we ask God to do things that we can just hop right in and do. So sometimes the answer to your prayer is, well, yeah, go do it, right? Like that's a pretty valid point. But when it comes to changing the hearts of men or revealing, like in Daniel's case, revealing a mystery or giving wisdom, would it make sense to say, for Daniel, to say a prayer to God and then just run in and go make a difference? I don't know how long it happened for Daniel between praying and getting that wisdom from God is probably pretty quick because the wise men had not yet been killed, so it may have been instantaneous. Letting God do what God does best. And you know what God does best? Changing the hearts of men. Shaping cultures. I mean, look what Daniel talked about God in his prayer, changing the seasons and the times, removing kings and setting up kings, giving wisdom to the wise, knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what's in the darkness, and the light dwells in it. There's so much that God can do that you and I cannot do. And so it's always going to be wise of us to act in prudence and discretion, to gather together to seek God's help, like no matter what's going on. Like, let's just say, let me get hypothetical. If your preacher ends up going to jail for preaching the gospel, not for like doing something dumb, for a positive thing, please let me know. You'll take care of the family while I'm gone. But what else should you do? Please let the number one thing you don't do, go picket the jail. Some of you would be happy, like that guy's finally gone. Bethany might be one of those too. Like, he's finally in jail. But let the second thing you do, or the first thing you actually do, is gather together in prayer. Gather together in prayer and let God do what he does best. But when God puts it on your heart to do something, you know what you should do? You should obey. I probably should have separated these two because they're actually two really important things that Daniel ended up doing. Number one is he took the information, the wisdom that God gave him, and what did he do with it? He went and did what he intended to do with it. Right? Is there ever a time where God's people have every tool that they possibly need and God has provided everything that they need to go into a culture and to be an influence in a culture, but we just don't go do it? And we do it all the time.
Nope, not one time.
Not one time, right? We do it. It is time for God's people to take all the incredible gifts that God has given and let's go make a difference with them. Like, let's seek God for these things. Let's hop off the keyboard every once in a while and go get to know people in their lives. Let's get away from the screen and off the phone and let's go interact with human beings and souls. And let's go learn people's stories so that we can make a difference. And when you interact with secular people, man, go back home and gather your family or gather God's family and pray for the things that you hear about. Not in gossip kind of ways, but just like, hey, I've got a buddy, they're dealing with this. I don't know how to interact with this, but can we pray for those things? And gather and pray and lift those things up on God and look for every opportunity to have those conversations and be that great influence. But when that opportunity opens up, don't miss it. Don't miss it because of a fear. Don't miss it because that's just not my personality. Or don't miss it because it was mentioned before, I think Seth mentioned, I might be wrong, or I'm afraid of being wrong. Don't miss the opportunities that God is going to put right in front of you to make an influence and make a difference. And the last thing, it's what goes without saying, what did Daniel do? Did he say, Nebuchadnezzar, I'm the wisest man in this room. Let me tell you what you dream and the interpretation of it. He said, there's not a single wise man in this whole place who could do what you're asking. But there is a God in heaven who can reveal mysteries and dreams and all these things. And he says it again at the very end of this interpretation, that this is not from me, this is from God. And so when Nebuchadnezzar hears this interpretation, this impossible task that Daniel was given with all these wise men, and only Daniel with this God that Nebuchadnezzar had pretty much been persecuting from the very beginning of coming in, is going to learn in some way that God, Daniel's God, is the God who can do the impossible. Now here's a question. Does that immediately turn Nebuchadnezzar into a man of faith? You don't always work that way, does it? But it will at least open his eyes to let him know who's really in charge. Undeniable things. We back up here. 47? We haven't even gotten there yet. All right. For James, I'll read verse 47. The king answered and said to Daniel, "Truly your God is God of gods and Lord of lords and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Yeah. Does that make Nebuchadnezzar into a perfect follower of God? It doesn't, but he knows who's in charge. And he knows where power comes from. And here's the thing, you don't give up when somebody doesn't give in to what you believe. You keep following God, you keep praising Him, you keep giving Him glory, you keep seeking His ways, and keep going and keep going and keep going. All right? Bell rang a long time ago. Love you guys. Rest of chapter 2 next week. Chris is going to tell us what all those levels of the statue mean.